He laughed at her unpolished rifle until it tore through 3 targets in 5 seconds. She wasn't aiming to impress. She was trained to finish. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country or city in the comments, backhand index pointing down. And don't forget to subscribe for more true inspired stories they don't want you to hear. Camp Merrion wasn't a place for second chances. It was where second-place shooters were politely dismissed and quietly forgotten. When Staff Sergeant Maren Knox arrived, most didn't notice. She wasn't part of the main rotation. She didn't come with the convoy. Her file, if it even existed, was thin. She arrived in a dusty government truck, carrying a worn duffel bag and a bolt-action rifle that looked older than most recruits. The guards didn't salute. No welcome brief. Just a clipboard and a sideways glance. By the time she crossed into the training grounds, the Alpha unit was already mid-exercise, SEAL-qualified snipers, fresh from a classified run in Tunisia, now showing off at the range. They saw her approach, boots scuffed, rifle unpainted, uniform regulation tight, but sun-faded. "Lost, ma'am?" One of them grinned. She didn't answer. "Looks like she borrowed that thing from a museum," another added, chuckling as he clicked the bolt on his polished M110. Knox nodded once, stepped to lane 7, and laid the case down gently. It opened with a soft sigh. Inside was the rifle. Wooden stock. No laser. No scope-mounted screen. Just steel, patience, and silence. By now, the others had stopped firing. She hadn't said a word, but somehow the air shifted. She adjusted the rear sight. No gloves. No spotter. The tech officer leaned toward the commanding lieutenant. "Sir, is she cleared for the long-range grid?" He shrugged. "She's here, isn't she?" The steel target sat at 1,800 meters, wind-crossed, just beyond the visible shimmer of the desert heat. Knox's rifle exhaled once. Crack. First plate spun. Crack. Second target dropped. Crack. The third one split at the edge, sending a shard spiraling. 5 seconds. 3 rounds. All hits. No scope cam. No drone. No second chances. She stood, locked the bolt open, and packed the rifle back into its case like folding a flag. No one laughed. She turned to leave. One SEAL stepped forward, jaw tight. "Ma'am, what unit are you with?" She paused, then offered a half smile. "I wasn't aiming to impress." And with that, she walked past them, back into the barracks like she had simply verified inventory. But inside the operations trailer, one camera had been recording. And when the colonel of training operations reviewed the footage later that night, he froze the screen on her ID. Maren Knox, civilian liaison, retired. Except no one had retired her. Not really. The name Maren Knox echoed across the briefing hall like a misplaced file name. Not loud, not shouted, but repeated. Muted, confused, and uncertain. No one in Camp Merrion had ever heard of her. But now everyone was asking. In the operations trailer, Colonel Seth Warren stared at the frozen image of her face on the security footage. Her expression was calm, unreadable, like someone who'd been trained not to flinch, not even for a lens. Beside him, Lieutenant Jensen tapped at the Central Personnel Database. "She's not in the active records. Check the reserves." "Already did." "Nothing." Warren leaned forward. "What about shadow assets?" Jensen hesitated. "Even Black Flag personnel have biometric footprints. She doesn't ping in any system we have clearance for. Then get someone with clearance." Meanwhile, Maren sat alone in the mess tent, boots off, sipping black coffee like it was tea. Around her, silence. No one sat nearby. Not because of hostility, more like uncertainty. Specialist Granger passed by, slowing as he caught her eye. He'd been one of the SEALs who laughed. "Ma'am," he said, nodding. "About yesterday." She looked up. "Don't apologize." "I wasn't." That surprised her. "I was going to ask." Granger scratched his head. "Was that a Type 03 bolt mod? On a Winchester relic?" She sipped her coffee again. "Good eye." He smiled nervously. "My father was a sniper. He used to say, if she adjusts her sights before she breathes, walk away." Maren chuckled softly. "Smart man." Back in the comms room, Jensen finally found something. "Sir, there's a hard-coded note. Top-level clearance. Only accessible through Defense Archives Vault 9. Warren stiffened. Vault 9? That's Cold War tier. Exactly. He stared at the monitor, then typed one word into the request log. Maren Knox. Seconds later, the screen blinked. Restricted. Authorization level. Executive Joint Command. Warren cursed under his breath. That night, a convoy of black vehicles approached the base. No insignias. No lights. From a lead car stepped a man in a charcoal suit with no visible rank. He walked straight to Warren's tent. "Colonel Warren," he said, not waiting for permission. "You saw her shoot." "Yes." "You're wondering why she's here. I'd like to know who sent her." The man placed a sealed envelope on Warren's desk. "She's not your concern. She's the program's concern." "What program?" But the man had already left. In her bunk, Maren opened an old, worn notebook. Inside were hand-drawn diagrams, not maps, but grids. Kill zones, shot angles, environmental overlays. One was labeled, Operation Red Glass, active, reopened. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she crossed out the word alone. Next to it, she wrote, "Not this time." Outside, the night was still. But in a base full of guns and noise, it was her silence that disturbed them most. By sunrise, Camp Merrion looked the same on the surface. Morning drills, gear checks, and caffeine-fueled grunts shaking off the cold. But the atmosphere had shifted. The instructors weren't looking at the usual suspects anymore. They were looking for her. Maren Knox hadn't signed any registration forms. She wasn't listed on the day's training manifest. And yet, she stood near the range again. Same worn boots, same faded uniform, same rifle. Lieutenant Vargas approached her with a clipboard and the kind of awkward stiffness that came from not knowing how to treat someone both uninvited and untouchable. "Staff Sergeant, you weren't assigned today. I know. We've got live drills scheduled. Observation only. I'll just be in the back," she replied, eyes already scanning the perimeter. Vargas hesitated. "You planning to take notes?" Maren turned. "You planning to learn anything?" That shut him up. Inside the command center, Colonel Warren had been up all night. The envelope was still sealed. The man in the suit hadn't returned, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. Keep your hands off Knox. But Warren wasn't one to follow silence. He called in his tech officer. "I want everything on Operation Red Glass. I don't care if it's sealed. We'll find an angle." "But, sir," she hit 3 targets at 1,800 meters. Cold barrel. No spotter. If she's what I think she is, we're sitting on a damn-time bomb. Or a miracle. Out at the live drill, the SEAL unit ran their course. Speed, precision, minimal chatter. Classic elite formation. But from the sidelines, Maren watched with narrowed eyes. She wasn't judging their aim. She was studying their habits. Where they paused. Where their shoulders tensed. How their eyes tracked or didn't. Then came the test run. Moving targets under wind interference. A shooter missed by 3 inches. Another adjusted too late. The instructors murmured. "Wind's changing." From the back, Maren called out, "That's not the wind. Your rangefinder's offset." The shooter frowned. "Excuse me." She stepped forward, picked up his rifle, and without even shouldering it, adjusted 2 notches. "Try now." He hesitated. Fired. Dead center. The squad went quiet. A senior sergeant stepped forward. "You've trained with Tier 1? Maren answered with a calm stare. "Tier 1 trained with me." Back in the comms tent, Warren's tech finally hit something. "Sir, found a name match. Maren Knox, classified under Project Night Hollow." Warren turned sharply. "That's disbanded." "On paper, what was her designation?" The tech swallowed. "Primary architect." Later that night, Vargas approached her tent. "You're not just here to observe, are you?" "No." "Then what are you doing?" Maren looked up from her notebook. Her voice was steady. "I'm checking if any of them are ready." "Ready for what?" She didn't answer. She just closed the notebook. On the cover, one phrase was etched. "Only 1 shot. Don't waste it." Camp Merrion's dining hall echoed with routine. Steel trays, clinking forks, half-heard gossip about operations no one could verify. But this morning, the buzz wasn't about missions. It was about her. Maren Knox had become the quiet center of a base that didn't know how to define her. Too skilled to ignore, too unknown to include. Lieutenant Vargas sat across from her, uninvited but not unwelcome. "They're scared of you," he said, stabbing at his eggs. "They should be," she replied without looking up. He smirked, unsure if it was a joke. "Is it true you trained in Night Hollow?" She didn't answer, but her fingers tensed slightly on her cup. He pushed. "Because the rumor is they disbanded the whole unit after what happened in Moldova." Maren finally met his eyes. That wasn't a rumor. In the records vault beneath Camp Merrion, Colonel Warren had broken 3 clearance rules in under an hour. Project Night Hollow files were encrypted under layers of decoys. Weather reports, outdated tech manuals, even an archive cafeteria menu from 1987. But eventually it opened. One photo, faded, a black and white image of 8 soldiers standing on a ridge, rifles slung low. No smiles, no insignias, just silence captured on film. At the center stood a woman, hair tied tight, no name, just a handwritten label below. KNX-1, back on the range. Maren held the Winchester again. She wasn't practicing. She was remembering. Her breath was steady, but her eyes weren't focused on the target. They were looking beyond it, like she was seeing a different field entirely. She whispered something. The tech officer nearby leaned closer. "Did you say something, ma'am?" She blinked. "No," she replied. "Just remembering the last time I missed." He laughed awkwardly. "That must have been years ago." Maren looked through the scope. 17 years, 3 months, 2 days. And then she fired. In the rec room that night, the younger recruits circled around Granger. "You were on the field with her, right?" He nodded. "She's like preternatural. Like she doesn't aim, she calculates." "Did she say where she served?" "Nope. You ask." He took a long breath. "I did. She said something about a convoy that never made it home, and a team that got marked as never existed." A hush settled. She didn't sound angry, just tired. Vargas brought her a folder later that evening. "It's from Colonel Warren." Unofficially, she opened it. Inside were 3 surveillance stills, vehicles crossing a desert border. One had a high-ranking arms dealer ID'd inside. Another bore markings long banned by the Geneva Convention. "They're real?" she asked. Vargas nodded. "And they're on the move again." Maren traced her finger across the grainy paper. "I've seen that emblem before," she murmured. "Where?" She didn't answer. She just stood and said, "I'll need a team, but not from your board. I want names that don't appear on walls." "You're rebuilding Night Hollow?" Vargas asked. "No," she replied, already walking away. "I'm finishing it." There were no formal orders, no official green lights. And yet, within 48 hours, 5 individuals arrived at Camp Merrion. None wearing rank, none asking for introductions. A former satellite comms technician, an explosives expert with a dishonorable discharge that no one could verify. A linguist whose passport had 17 stamps and no birth certificate. And a medic who hadn't filed a VA claim in 22 years. They didn't salute Maren. They just nodded. Vargas watched from a distance, notebook in hand. "They're ghosts," he muttered. Maren replied without turning. "They're finishers." In a disused wing of the base, the newly formed team set up shop. No names on the door. No logs filed. On the wall, Maren pinned a blown-up satellite photo. Target, a remote outpost in a desert corridor, once thought to be defunct, now reactivated. She circled a sector with red marker. "That symbol," she said, pointing to a half-visible flag on a vehicle. "It hasn't been flown since 2006. Granger stepped forward. "That's a war crime tribunal flag, disavowed after the Balkan leaks." Maren nodded, "Which means whoever's behind is not only armed, but untraceable, and believes we're still too blind to look." Meanwhile, Colonel Warren sat in his office, staring at a blinking message on a private channel. Up red glass, live trigger confirmed. Source, Knox Alpha/signature validated. His phone rang. A voice he didn't recognize. "She's lit the fuse, Colonel. You either deny, delay, or disappear." Warren hung up. He poured a drink he hadn't touched in years. "We buried this," he said quietly, but it didn't stay dead. Night drills at Camp Merrion shifted. Soldiers noticed shadow movements. Outdoor lights cut for brief intervals. Drones scrambled from hangars without reports filed. The usual rhythms of the base were being rewritten. At the armory, Maren opened a long-sealed case, a custom-built sniper system with her initials carved beneath the bolt. Granger approached. "Where are we going?" Maren locked the bolt into place. "Back to the ridge." In the war room, Vargas confronted Colonel Warren. "You know where she's going, don't you?" Warren didn't answer at first. Then, "She's finishing what we told her not to start." Vargas snapped. "Why was she erased?" Warren leaned forward. "Because she made the rest of us look like students." 2 nights later, the ghost team left. No farewell, no orders, just a flight path buried under layers of misdirection. Before stepping onto the transport, Maren turned to Vargas, who'd followed them to the runway. "You'll never hear what happens next," she said, "but you'll feel it." As the plane lifted into darkness, the base behind them quieted once more. But in the air, a different kind of silence took hold. One sharpened by vengeance, by memory, by a promise written in blood and buried beneath classified ink. And for the first time in years, Project Night Hollow breathed again. The desert looked the same as it did 17 years ago, raw, scorched, silent. But Maren Knox saw what others missed. The shadows were longer. The wind carried a new tone. Something buried had moved. The transport had landed under blackout protocol. No GPS trail, no confirmation ping, just a coordinated silence understood only by those trained to listen between lines. They approached the ridge under moonlight, their footfalls muffled by sand. Granger scanned ahead with thermal, but Maren wasn't looking for heat. She was watching for ghosts. "Perimeter's quiet," the linguist whispered. "No," Maren replied. "It's too quiet." 30 meters from the outpost fence, the team halted. The comms tech knelt and tapped into a fiber line buried under rock. Her screen blinked, then froze. "That's not local," she murmured. "What do you mean?" asked the medic. "I mean, I'm staring at a control script written in Cold War Russian, embedded with American failsafes." Granger looked up. "We're not just walking into a black site." Maren pulled a small capsule from her vest. "We're walking into a forgotten handoff." Inside the outpost, a dozen armed men sat around blue-lit monitors, watching regions of the world that had moved on without them. A flicker on one screen. Motion detected. Sector West. One man stood. "Run the ID trace." The AI returned nothing. No match. He hesitated, then muttered, "She's back." Outside, Maren placed a hand on the fence's support beam. Her fingers traced a symbol etched long ago, an hourglass inside a triangle. They kept the mark. The linguist squinted. What was it? An agreement? With who? Maren's voice was dry. "With the enemy we couldn't defeat, so we hired them instead." The infiltration was surgical. For minutes, 0 shots fired. When the team entered the command room, alarms wailed, but no one fought back. The guard stared, recognizing her. By the time Colonel Warren received the signal, it was already too late to stop it. He stood alone in the comms tower, staring at the decrypted transmission blinking across his console. Each file had the same header. Project Night Hollow, red glass. Released by KNX-1. Status: public access in 56 hours. He didn't sit. He didn't breathe for a moment. The past, buried under 1,000 layers of denials and burn bags, was clawing its way back to daylight. And Maren Knox was holding the match. In Washington, alarms didn't sound, but emails started auto-deleting. Secure lines went cold. And within 12 hours, 3 names disappeared from the Joint Special Activities roster. Inside a secure chamber at Langley, a man in a pressed gray suit stared at a live feed from a desert outpost. "She got in," he muttered. A voice from the shadows responded. "We underestimated her again." He clenched his jaw. "No, we underestimated what we taught her." Back at the outpost, the ghost team worked in shifts. Granger compiled the metadata. The linguist decrypted a dialect last seen in Cold War archives. The medic reassembled physical logs torn from bunkers. And Maren, she watched them all without speaking, only nodding. She hadn't slept. She didn't need to. The adrenaline of reckoning was more potent than rest. At 3:40 An internal alert triggered. Incoming convoy, the comms text said. No, IFF signal. 10 clicks out. Armored. Maren's voice cut through the room. How many hostiles? At least 20. Maybe more. The team braced. Do we extract? Granger asked. No, Maren said flatly. We show them who remembers. They rigged the perimeter. Not with explosives, but with light. Flood beams, camera feeds, old broadcast antennas brought back to life. If they're coming to erase us, Maren said, we'll burn the shadows they hide in. The first armored truck crested the hill at dawn. They stopped when they saw the setup. Dozens of blinking lights. A raised transmission dish. And in front of it all, Maren standing alone. No weapon in hand. Just the military-issue watch ticking on her wrist. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. You have 10 seconds to surrender the site. Maren raised the watch. Tick, she whispered. She pressed a button on the side. Every screen behind her lit up, projecting images, names, redacted missions, fallen teams, classified betrayals. The ghosts were no longer whispers. They were facts. Back in Washington, hundreds of encrypted files began reaching journalists, senators, and international courts. Some were scrambled, some incomplete, but enough truth had slipped through, enough to start a storm. At Camp Merrion, Colonel Warren stood before a screen showing Maren's last message. You buried our names. We just taught the world how to read tombstones. Maren Knox didn't stay to see the fallout. By the time the final packets reached their destinations, she and her team had already vanished, back into the silence that once made them dangerous. No medals, no speeches, just absence. But the world was no longer the same. In Brussels, a military tribunal convened to review incidents that had been officially denied for decades. In Langley, a secure vault was permanently sealed under executive order. Its contents labeled "Do Not Unseal." KNX, one triggered. And at Camp Merrion, the front gates bore a new sign. Maren Knox Range, in honor of those who served in silence. Vargas was the one who placed it. He had never heard back from her. But weeks later, a package arrived at his desk. No return address. Inside, a worn leather notebook, the same one she always carried. On the first page, a note in careful handwriting. Vargas, this isn't a confession. It's a record. Because when history forgets, people suffer twice. Maren, elsewhere, the former outpost in the desert was reclaimed, this time by sunlight, wind, and time. Its servers wiped, its corridors empty. But under one table, someone found a watch, scratched, still ticking, left intentionally. Its back engraved with only 2 words. Remember U.S. In a quiet mountain town, a woman matching Maren's description was spotted tending a small garden. She spoke little, laughed only with children, and wore no insignia, except a faint tattoo under her sleeve that resembled an hourglass in a triangle. When asked if she had served, she simply said, I finished what others were told to forget. The files released became the basis for dozens of investigations, 2 resignations, and a change in how unofficial operations were recorded, if at all. But most importantly, it gave names to the nameless, faces to the erased, stories to the forgotten. And at the heart of it all, an operative known only by a code name. KNX1, thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if it made you pause, share it, because remembrance is resistance. And some legacies aren't carved in stone. They're carried forward by those who choose to never forget.